but I understand you in the United States. I've just seen some headlines on Twitter or something. I don't really understand it, so maybe you can explain it to me. There's some sort of religious sacrament that's taking place in your country in a couple of days where people are going to go into some sort of booth and tick some sort of box, and some deity is going to decide how the country will be run for the next 4 years?
Yeah, it's this strange cult ritual, and the people involved seem to think it's not strange because they see everybody else involved, so they don't see it very objectively. Yeah, they basically go into this special building and go hide in a booth and do, I don't know what incantations or things they do, and then they press a button and decide which deity, which they don't look like deities, they look like people. In fact, they don't look like nice people. But I have it on good authority, if there is such a thing, that these are deities, and they get to choose one to rule the world for 4 years, and that counts as being free. That's good enough.
Right.
Close enough to being free is to choose between two psychotic sociopaths to violently dominate everyone, and everybody's all excited.
Now, come on, Larkin. They don't rule the world. They are the leaders of the free world. Get it straight. Yes, indeed. And this is an interesting sacrament, or whatever you want to call it. And be careful, everyone out there. If you take a selfie of your ballot after you've filled in the appropriate box, apparently you might be arrested, depending on what state you're in. So, you got to be careful. The gods have put a lot of rules in place for this particular sacrament, and it's to be taken very seriously. All right, clearly you and I are on the same side of this conversation, but I am going to do my honest level best to put on the devil's advocate cap and actually attempt to put, I think, a real argument in place against our flippant dismissal of election and voting. Selection, as I like to say, because it's, but anyway. And I think there is a legitimate concern that people out there have when they hear people saying, don't vote. The concern is, if candidate A embodies a set of policies we'll call policy package A, candidate B embodies a set of policy that we'll call policy package B, if you truly believe, whether or not that belief is true and justified, but if you truly believe policy package A will result in better material conditions for you and your family, at least over the next 4 years, then isn't that an argument to do at least that in the meantime while you're working on other ways of trying to free yourself?
No, and here's why not. Let's say policy, collection of policies B is the one that somebody thinks is preferable, and A is just intolerable and unspeakable. In that mindset, all the tyrants have to do to get people to vote for A, the worse one, is to make an even worse one, so that between the two they vote for the worse one. I mean, the less bad one in their view. But in principle, that means they can trick you into advocating complete totalitarianism as long as they can offer another choice that's even slightly worse. And if you look at American politics, that's what it's been for 200 years. It's almost always, that people complain about negative campaigning. Well, what else is there? All there is your guy is even worse than my guy. And the reason it's such a brilliant trick, well, it's not even brilliant. It's sad that people still fall for it. I used to use as a sort of extreme example, like if they had Stalin running versus Hitler, would you still vote? Would you still think it's legitimate? Would you still go, well, we definitely got to keep that out of power? Well, that stopped being a hypothetical when the candidates ended up being Hillary, Stalin, and Trump, Hitler. It really...
He will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to take them away. We enforce them. But at the end of the day, each and every man should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force
is necessary, you need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is November 17th, 2016, and we are coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights, Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, on the Nonpartisan Liberty for All Media and Radio Network, which now runs 24/7, so you can tune into it anytime on the live stream, which you can catch on Spreaker.com and nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, and to the archives immediately following the show on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and iTunes. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote self-ownership and the ideas of true freedom and liberty, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom. Exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. And, of course, it does a lot more. That's just a summary, a very small summary to kind of summarize my views and the views of the show. We, of course, are always happy to hear from you. You can reach us via phone at 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or via Skype, username Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Just send us a contact request and what you want to talk about, your name and where you're Skyping us from. That sounds painful, getting Skyped. And you can check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, which has the links to all our social media, Facebook, also original articles, as well as blogs, or I call them blogs/articles, and a bunch of other stuff. So please check us out there at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. So tonight, we're finally going to talk about the election, not something that I really have talked much about in general, or I think I did one or two shows. One of them was because of the person that was co-hosting with me at that time for that show wanted to actually talk about the election, but we talked about it in a different way. And then I brought up Trump a long time ago just to talk about what a douchebag he is. And that was before he even got the nomination, which I haven't changed my opinion, of course, just because somebody got elected. But the reason, I mean, partially is not why he's a douchebag. We'll get into that. But because the reason why I pretty much avoided a lot of talk about the election is because that's all everybody else talked about. You know, there's all these things going on and everybody's just talking about every aspect they possibly can of an election, and of an election of two people, first of all, that according to polls, nobody liked either of them. And the only reason that I brought that up, because I got criticized by somebody for bringing that up, about, well, Trump had, I think it was somebody that was defending Trump and how many people came to his rallies. First of all, I did a show about perspective, and we'll talk a little about that today, because it's all about elections are all about perspective as well, because you have a certain amount of people in the country or a certain amount of eligible voters, and then you have, how many votes the actual candidate that wins gets. So like when Obama was president, and he even said this with Trump, this people have spoken and whatever, and which is a bunch of bullshit, because the majority of people do not vote for the winning candidate, because, I mean, in this election, they actually didn't. But I mean, the majority of people in the country don't vote for the winning candidate because most of them don't vote. Now, Obama actually gave a percentage of, he said 43% of eligible voters didn't vote. Now, I believe it's higher than that, actually, because it came out to about 120 million. And I don't know. Well, you would think he'd have the correct stats. So I guess, if he's making a speech and giving that number, that he's correct. However, there are people that can't vote because they've been convicted of a felony, and for other reasons. I mean, that's the main reason I can think of. But anyway, you have to put things like that in perspective, so we'll talk about that. But what I was saying about Trump was that somebody tried to say, 10,000 people went to his rally, so that poll doesn't, or not 10,000, but the tens of thousands of people that are going to his rallies. And I'm like, yeah, but there's 321 million people in the country, or something like that, 320 million, around that amount of people in the country. So that really doesn't mean shit. But the reason why I referred to that poll was to back up, and not just that alone, along with a bunch of other stuff, is my whole point that it doesn't matter what people want. They don't have a say in the government. One of the things that Trump was right about, yeah, it is rigged. Now, he said it as a personal thing, like it's rigged against him. But no, it's rigged in the sense of, and not even in the votes, although I believe that if the powers that be had to rig an election vote-wise, they would. But it's rigged in so many ways, and I don't know if people tuned in early enough. If you're listening live, if you're listening to the archive, then you would have heard it, to hear an excerpt from Larkin Rose's interview that he did, I think, about a week before the election, talking about, this lesser of two evil bullshit. And, if you were voting between Stalin and Hitler, I mean, would you actually vote for one of those candidates? I think to vote for somebody out of the lesser of two evil philosophy is ridiculous. And what another thing that I'm going to talk about, and that I believe as well, and that this poll helps support it at the same time, but I don't need a poll to fucking support it. It's just there's so many other things that you can point to. But, you look at what happened with Bush and Obama. You just look at the Obama presidency in itself. Things like that. But it shows that you don't have control over. It's just another example of you don't have control over the candidates you vote for. They're presented to you. Now, if you're not part of one of these fucking parties, then you really don't. You don't either way, but you have the Democrat and the Republican just presented in front of you, and vote for one of these people. Why? Why would I vote for one of those people? And first of all, I don't approve of people ruling over me, or of this government, or of any government for that matter. So I don't approve of a ruler. Now, what is somebody who runs for office? Really, what somebody that runs for any office is someone that's telling you that they know what's better for you than you do, at least in some aspect. Now, it depends on what office they're running for. Somebody could be running for school board. And they're saying when they're running for school board that they have some kind of plan, that they know what's better for the schools than you do. Now, that's an example of something that, you know, in that example, maybe they actually do, but it doesn't matter. But when it comes to higher offices, obviously, where you're talking about the state legislature, or here in Las Vegas, we have the county commission. A lot of counties have county commissions, or your representatives in Congress, or president, which we'll be talking about tonight. So obviously these people are sitting there saying, I have the best. I mean, they don't come out and say it in those words, but they do come out and say it. They have a plan. They have an agenda. They have things they want to do. And these things that they want to do are going to affect your life. So what they're saying is that I know what's better, especially when it comes to an office like president or senator or, Congress. They're saying that they know what's better for you and your life and how to make your life better. And they can do a better job at it than you can. So you need them to rule over you, which is a bunch of bullshit. Not only that, and I'm not one of those people that down or fault people that vote. If you voted for president and or any of the things, I'm not somebody to say, well, you shouldn't have voted. However, if you voted for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, I think a little differently, because people could have voted for the third-party candidates if you really feel strongly about voting. And one of the things I had brought up was voting on the questions, which I think are rigged as well, to be honest. But they're rigged the same way. I mean, there was so much money. We had a question here in Nevada whether to do background checks on all guns now. And the money that came in from out of state, from Bloomberg, was, I think Bloomberg himself, his organization, was $14 million right there. They ended up with $19 million versus $6 million on the other side. And it's still, even with all that money, I think it was 50.45 to 49 point, whatever the difference would be, 5.5. I mean, it was so fucking close that, it barely passed, because this is Nevada. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, how the fuck does something like that pass in Nevada? And I'm sure a lot of people like me just didn't vote, where for that question, I could have went in and left everything blank and voted on that. And we had another question to legalize cannabis, and I should have voted on that, but that passed. So that was fine. But it is rigged in that sense, because you have in every state, whatever the election is, you have money coming in, unless maybe it's a little very local town election or something like that. Even with, I mentioned county commission. I mean, those are rigged as well. And what I mean is, money, political parties, all of that. You look at the presidential race. First of all, on one side, you basically had two people to choose from if you're a Democrat to vote for. And then on the other side, you had a bunch of people. But still, it doesn't mean you like any of those people. And these are the people that are able to run. It's not like anybody can just run for president and have any type of chance. Plus, you have to join the party, and you have to be supported by the party. And the party can pick whoever they want. And they actually have the right to do that. Like the Libertarian Party has a whole different nomination process. And that's the whole point of a party, that they don't have to have the people vote in their candidate to represent a party. The issue, though, is that money, federal money, which is taxpayer money, obviously, goes to these parties, and it shouldn't. And I have an issue with that because depending on the state, you know, I can't vote in the, not that I care because I wouldn't anyway, but I can't vote in these primaries. So pretty much you get, as Larkin Rose was saying, you get, you know, one person, and it's always the lesser of two evils. I think in this election was probably the closest to just pure evils that you're going to get. But either way, why are you going to vote for evil? If you're going to vote for anybody, vote for the third party. And what that does, if the Libertarian Party would have got 5% of the vote, they would have been able to been on the ballot in every state and participate in the debates. So you have a monopoly, really, you know, a biopoly, I guess. But the Republicans and Democrats want to, you know, they're on the same side. They want more government, and they only want their two parties to control everything and their two parties to exist. And they'll do whatever they can to keep it that way. So that's their ruling structure, and it will stay that way for the most part, I think, unless, even if, you know, a third party got into the debates, it's still, you know, with the money and the it's like a name brand. I mean, the majority of this country, I do not believe, is part of one of these parties. Now, they might be a registered Democrat or registered Republican because I feel like they have no option. And people convince you, oh, if you vote for somebody else, you're throwing your vote away. How are you throwing your vote away if you're in there are 120 million people that voted. So how much you think your one little vote counts, first of all? I know you have the Electoral College, so it depends on how many people in your state. But, I mean, even if you take the smallest state, which I think population-wise would be Rhode Island, either out of Hawaii, but I think it's Rhode Island. But anyway, it's still millions of people. So it's just all bullshit. It's an illusion to give you, they want to give you an illusion of a choice. And I believe the candidates have been pre-selected. And, well, the candidates have, but I mean, the winner has been pre-selected. And that it, you know, by having Trump actually win, there's a benefit to that, in that it will make some people that maybe thought things were rigged, like, oh, maybe they're not. And, you know, things are going to change. And you have people that have been saying the same fucking thing for 50 years or longer, you know, if they're older, that, oh, if we just get the right people in. Now, and I have clips of fucking people that all they've done is criticize government and talk about how bad it is. And they're sitting there, like Alex Jones is sitting there, you know, thinking that the world has been saved. I mean, things are so fucked up, man. It's just, it's surreal to me. You know, Trump is a fucking clown. Hillary is, you know, one of the biggest criminals that probably has ever ran for president. And there's been, a lot of them. A lot of people don't know about what went on in Mena, Arkansas during Iran-Contra. Supposedly her law firm may have been involved in laundering money and shit like that. At worst case, or best case for her, I guess she knew what was going on. She knows how corrupt Bill Clinton was. And all the other shit that she did with orchestrating stuff in the State Department with Libya and moving weapons from Benghazi and Syria and all of that shit. And it's just, and it doesn't really matter. The point is that it doesn't matter who the fucking president is. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me. Oh, Trump's in there, so now it's the end of the fucking world. No, it's not. And we'll go through why. Basically, it didn't matter who got elected. Number one, whoever got elected, the powers that be wanted them to get elected. They narrowed it down to those two candidates. No matter how it seemed, those are the two candidates they wanted, and that's who they wanted to get elected. Now, I don't know why, and I don't know. Well, I mean, I have a theory, but obviously I don't know the details. I don't know if it was a more of a last minute thing, thinking about, okay, because if you look at it, how things run in cycles where a lot of times it switches from Republican to Democrat just because people think, like when Obama came into the scene, I guess, and talking about hope and change, and you had 8 years of Bush who just destroyed the fucking housing market. I mean, he didn't destroy the housing market single-handedly, but the housing market had just been destroyed. He went into invaded a bunch of countries for really no reason, all of these things. And then Obama comes along with hope and change, and what did you get? You got the same of Bush. You got more spying, more free, when it comes to at least freedom. So where I see it being the same is there's an agenda of what I call the powers that be. So I refer to the powers that be as a number of people and organizations. So you have the corporations, you have billionaires that you probably don't even know their name, and neither do I. And you have the groups like the Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg Group, groups that get together in secret. Well, I don't know that the CFR really gets together in secret, but groups that get together that are involved in government are made up of, some of the people that make them up are former elected officials, and talk about policy and government and things like that when they're not part of the government. So they're part of dictating policy. So I use the word the powers that be because to go through all of that every time would be, kind of a waste of time. That, I think it's made up of this, this, and this. And I say it sometimes just because obviously there are people that don't listen to every show or maybe never heard me before or whatever. But even just saying the powers that be, use your imagination as well. If, I don't actually go into what I believe that to be. Or you can always send me an email and ask me a question. But yeah, I mean, those are the people that some people call them the shadow government, whatever. And the CIA being part of that as well, because they pretty much operate in secret and do whatever they want because they're able to fund themselves through things like drugs, which is probably another reason why drugs are still illegal, because it makes no sense for them to be illegal. I mean, everything points to things being better for people if drugs were legal. And I mean all drugs. Not to mention the fact that regardless of all that, that's not why I believe they should be legal. I believe in a concept called self-ownership, that you own yourself. Now, government believes they own you, and they have shown that in their actions. Drugs being illegal being one of them. So, essentially, I believe that this election was rigged for Trump, and it was rigged, and you have in every election's the same way. It's all the same shit. It doesn't matter who gets elected. Last one was for Obama. Then before, you had Bush. But it was, you have government media, you have money, and don't underestimate money, because with money you can not only buy, well, you really don't have to buy the government media. I think they're pretty much controlled already. They're already bought. So I don't think that the candidate has to really buy them to slant stories. But for advertising, commercials, I mean, there were commercials all over the place, of course. You have billboards, all that shit, and just getting their name out there. I mean, money is very important, and that, along with the media being rigged. Well, people will say, well, but it was rigged against Trump, and every story about Trump was bad. But that's reading into what people want. I mean, it's looking at it and seeing, okay, Obama ended up being the same as Bush. We're sick of the majority of people, and this is why I believe Trump won, regardless of nothing him saying having to do anything with freedom or any of his policies being remotely good. But I guess, everybody has something that's good somewhere, whatever, or some good ideas, or a clock is right twice a day, a broken clock. But that, in planning to get Trump elected, it's like feeding off of that underdog type of, not really underdog, but that what they looked at him as anti-establishment, not from Washington, not a politician. I mean, in a way, he's worse. He's a businessman. And you look at how many times he changed his mind on shit and said one thing then another. He used to be a Democrat, but even throughout the election, and even how he's changing things now, and we'll get into that. So I think that for the country and for all of these people that were getting fed up with the establishment, that it's a benefit in a way, the illusion of him getting elected, because there's an illusion of him being some, I don't know why people even think this. I'm fucking dumbfounded, to be honest. Some of the shit that I've heard self-proclaimed anarchists even say about Trump, because they're not anarchists, they're full of shit. And I mean real anarchists, not this whole I'll get into this when I get into the protesters, but they're calling the protesters anarchists. Anarchy does not mean total chaos, go and start fucking riots, okay? That's not what it means, and we'll get into that later. But that it would be more beneficial to push the agenda. So I look at it this way. Now, there might be little things here or there that are different between candidates. There's always going to be that, and between the parties. But they're not really important things in the big scheme of the powers that be, even though the powers that be don't agree on everything neither. But I think one thing they agree on is the purpose of government. So let me take a step back here and explain my view on government in general, which I've talked about before, but then it will make it easier to understand when I get into all this detail. And I'll probably go a little late tonight, especially that it's Thursday and one more day of work and the week's over. Yay. And then it fucking starts all over again. on Monday. But that's another thing we need to do a show on, because all these regulations really are, people don't understand. They support more government, and we will talk about the protesters and how they're hypocrites in my book, even though I can't stand Trump, but I can get into why they're hypocrites. But the more regulations you have, they don't understand that more people could start their own fucking businesses. There's something called barrier to entry. I've mentioned this word a million times, or barriers to entry. So each industry has barriers to entry. It might be you need at least a certain amount of money, or you need certain amount of experience, or now because of the internet, really anybody can start a business. Now it might not be, it depends on the business, the barriers to entry, but to at least get into it, there's barely any. Now to be successful is a whole nother story. Anybody can start an online business, but the problem is starting a successful online business. Now, for all these other businesses, there are literal barriers to entry called regulations that you have to go through and get this permit and do this and do that and all of these things and get this approved and do this paperwork. And then after you do that and you need all this money to do it, you got to compete with, say, if you're talking department stores, with a corporation like Walmart that benefits from governments, not just the federal, but local governments, where there are examples of, well, Walmart came to town, so we gave them, we built a road for them, we gave them 5 years, no taxes, all of this shit, or these benefits that they give to these big corporations. And a corporation is a government created entity. People don't realize, they talk about capitalism. I talk about free markets. I wouldn't even call it the same thing anymore, because by definition, capitalism, it sort of means free markets, but either way, what we have now is not capitalism. The United States has never had capitalism. Neither has anybody. They've had a form of it, but now it's corporatism, it's crony capitalism, it's all of that. But corporations are a government creation, because what a corporation is it gives you limited liability. And what that means is whatever money you put into the business, you lose, but they can't come after you for your personal assets. That's a legal definition. So, meaning that I start, or you start your own fucking restaurant and you incorporate it. It doesn't have to be a corporation. It can be like an LLC, or there are other business, legal business entities, which is all government, because it's laws that allow you to have limited liability. And the only liability you have is whatever you put into the company and your own money, because you've basically given that to the company, right? Whatever you've put in, you can't get back. But you do that, and say during that course of time you make a couple $1 million. Say your business does great and you become a millionaire, which usually doesn't happen. But say you do, they can't come after you for that. They can't come after your personal assets if you go bankrupt. So if the company owes all this money, goes bankrupt, you're fine personally. Now your business is, whatever. So you don't have to worry about shit. The other thing is the banking industry, and how the government basically, the Fed, which is not government, but it is, but it's not, but it's a private bank where the chair of the Fed is appointed by the president, but other than that, they can pretty much do whatever they want. But the government could get rid of the Fed. They don't have to have a national bank or a government bank. And from that, all these corporations are able to benefit because they're able to give out money. They distribute money to all the banks. The banks are able to practice something called fractional reserve banking, which means, if the bank has $100 in savings, for example, they're able to lend out 1,000. But of course, you're talking about, millions and billions of dollars that that they have access to, and they just create it out of nowhere, just like the Fed creates it out of nowhere because money is backed by nothing. So I don't want to get too much into that, but that's a whole nother, issue that causes people to support a certain form of government like socialism and not believe in free markets because they don't know the truth about them. But anyway, when we're talking about government in general and what I believe the powers that be want to do and what they want to do to every government and the purpose of government in the first place. First of all, the purpose of government is obviously to control people. I don't know that you can argue that point, that's pretty much a fact. Otherwise, why have a government? Well, what they tell you government is there for is to protect your rights. That's a bunch of bullshit. You look up any definition of government, control is in that definition. So this is more my opinion or theory or whatever you want to call it, but it's backed up by information, at least information that doesn't say this is exactly how it is. Like there's some document that came from, whatever, but it's backed up by information in that, coming to a logical conclusion based on all of the stuff that has gone on throughout the years and whatever. It's a conclusion based on information, but it's still my conclusion in my opinion. So I don't want to sit here and say, well, this is a fact. I have the document from, all these presidents that it's a big conspiracy that this is what they're there to do. But I know that Jesse Ventura talked about when he was governor, how he was taken to, it might have been the state legislature, like some basement, and talked to about stuff that he can't even talk about or whatever. But you also got the CIA going on too, and the president probably doesn't even know what the fuck the CIA is doing. They just operate, and who knows how many, the CIA may even have their own divisions. If you've ever seen the movie The Men in Black, now that had to do with aliens and whatever, but how they operated basically unknown and no one knew who they were. And who knows if there aren't government agencies that exist that are maybe extensions of the CIA, for example. And that wouldn't surprise me at all. Now, I don't know that. That's just... I'm not even saying that I think that. I'm saying it's a possibility. But when I look at governments and their goal being their ultimate goal now initially is to control things, but to a certain level, because nobody would sign on in the first place, basically, to start the government. Now, of course, none of us did. We were just born into it, which is a whole nother thing that we may or may not get into. But at some point, the government was started. They actually technically overthrew the government and implemented the Constitution. they had the Articles of Confederation. Supposedly they claim that they followed, whatever it said in the Articles of Confederation when it came to overthrowing the government. But the way they did it was kind of secretive, and certain people they didn't tell, and it wasn't done in how it should have been. And it was to take more control, because the Articles of Confederation, the states had more power. And when you look at that, if a state has more power, what it means is there are less people making decisions. Now, I still think you still don't have any power. I mean, if you take a smaller country, you take a country with 2 million people compared to like the United States, which there should never be a country with this many people. And I've said that so many times, because you have a federal government ruling over so many people that your vote means nothing. But even if it's 2 million people, yes, your vote means more, because it's, say all 2 million people vote, it's 1/2 millionth compared to 1/120 millionth of the say, which again is getting into meaningless shit, but you still don't have say and you don't have rights, because there's things that governments have no right to decide anyway. But getting back to my philosophy on governments, like, for example, what you put in your body, but they decide that anyway. But so, they start off presenting to the people, if you want to take the U.S. government, because that's really what we're talking about, although this is the case with other governments, but they just weren't as good of doing it, because a lot of them were a lot older, and they, like if you come out and start a government and come out right away as a dictator, and you tell the people that you're gonna just rule over them and torture them and whatever and violate their rights, most of those people are gonna say either I don't want to live in this place, or yeah, we're going to try to fight back first and see if we can never establish your government. But if you come out and say, well, we're going to have all these protections, and we're going to have checks and balances, and we're going to have this piece of paper, magical piece of paper that protects all your rights, people are more apt to say, oh, yeah, okay, well, you're going to be there to just protect our rights. Now, what I believe was the goal from the beginning and has happened, because if you really look at it, and there's certain people that I have respect for, and I don't know what their real view is, because it's hard to know. Things get passed down, and there's different views of different people. Like Abraham Lincoln was presented like he was this great guy. If you really read into Lincoln and learn more things about him, you learn how he violated the Constitution, I don't know how many times, and violated people's rights and did all these things that basically he didn't have the right to do. And he started an income tax, actually. That was the first income tax, was I think 1861, and it was for maybe 20 years or something. It didn't last that long, because it was, I believe, because of the Civil War and more to support that. But he had no right to do that. Anyway, so that the government starts off and tells people, that, but you put people in power. So what you do is you give people power over you. Well, none of us did, because we weren't fucking alive. And even the people back then didn't. The elite at the time, because that's what it was. The rich landowners, the elite, and I'm not saying all of them were bad people. Like I said, some of them, like Jefferson and Washington, I have respect for. And, and I read some of Jefferson's stuff. But I don't know what was really going through their head. They could have wrote whatever they wanted and been thinking totally something else. And the majority of the people could have had that in mind. Look, we just want the rich white landowners to rule this. We're the elites, and we want to rule over the rest of everybody else. That could have totally been what it was about. And I think to an extent that probably was what it was about. But you can't start off that way. So what I believe happened is, and the goal from the beginning was, and this is over generations, obviously, that you take away more freedoms, more rights, and I'm talking about negative rights, more controls. And I'll just give a quick definition of positive and negative rights for those people who don't know the difference. So it's easy to get confused. So negative rights are rights like having the right to put what you want in your body, having the right to possess whatever you want, having the right to self-defense, having the right to own property. Basically things that don't involve other people. That's not the definition I would give it. Positive rights are the rights that progressives now or socialists are trying to convince people these are what rights are. Like the right to force somebody to perform a procedure on you, like free healthcare is not a right. The right to food, the right to a certain wage. These are not rights. You don't have a right to anything. And the only thing I said you kind of have a right to, although some people will even debate this, is that your parents, when you're a baby and you can't take care of yourself, feed you and take care of you. Now, some people could logically or ethically even argue that at a certain age, a young age, that they don't have to be responsible for you anymore. But that's a whole nother issue. So that's the difference between positive and negative rights. And positive rights are not rights. They're not freedoms. I heard somebody say, well, I have the right not to be killed, so that means, or I have the right to live, so that means you don't have the right to own a gun. Which is it's ludicrous, the statement itself. Because one, you're assuming that, okay, one of these people may kill you out of the millions, hundreds of millions. So because of that, you're saying they don't have the right to own a gun. It's just, it's a ridiculous thing. But people are being convinced that they have the rights to all these things. And you don't. You don't have the right to anything. You don't. And I mean that in the sense of nobody owes you anything. So, there are certain rights that you have as I call them human rights, but then people get confused because they look at human rights as positive rights. But the right, when just being a person, you have the right of self-ownership. And all those rights based off of self-ownership, like the right to self-defense, the right to own property. But that's not somebody giving you something. You're not entitled to somebody giving you something or getting things for free or anything like that. You are, as a human, as long as you don't hurt somebody else, kill, rape, steal, anything like that, you have the right to do whatever you want. And those are the negative rights. But you're not owed anything by society. You're not owed money or food or medical care or anything like that. You're just not. You know, nobody owes you, or you're not owed a job. That's life. That's how it is. But in being a human being, you have rights as a human being as long as you're not affecting other people's rights. Because what you're doing, if you believe in positive rights, you're forcing other people, you're violating other people's human rights or natural rights. Because if you force a doctor to do something, or you force somebody to give you their money, or you force somebody to give you food. Now, if they give it to you on their own, voluntarily, that's fine. But to force somebody to do something for you, you have no right to do that. So getting back to government, so essentially over generations, it's the end goal. It'd be easier to put it this way. The end goal is the government wants to control every aspect of your life and everything, not just your life, but they want to control everything, including every aspect of your life. That's the best way to put it. And possibly with the United States, the world. And maybe not the world run by the United States, but the world run by, 5 major countries or something like that in a world government. But I think that's after the fact. And I'm not really concerned about other countries as far as I'm concerned about other countries. Like, I don't want to see people getting killed, and I hope they're in the best possible situations they can be in, and their freedoms are not being violated. But what I'm saying is I'm not worried about other countries violating my freedoms, because no other country has ever violated my freedom. And that's why I get to say that the military somehow protects my freedom is bullshit. And I'm not trying to offend anybody in the military, but I'm sorry, it's bullshit. Because Vietnam, Iraq, Iran, well, they didn't go in Iran, there's sanctions, but all of these covert ops going into other countries, drones, all of this shit that the military does is just following orders from politicians, and essentially they're out there to carry out the agenda of politicians. They don't protect anybody's freedom. If you were protecting my freedoms, you'd be standing up to fucking police and the government, the U.S. government. Now, I don't need anybody to protect me personally. Okay, I got enough. I have. I'll call them machines, I guess. I have my own means of protection. We'll just leave it at that. So I don't need the military to protect me. And if somebody attacked the U.S., we have enough guns as a nation, although I believe we should have access to whatever the police have access to, because that would be the only way to actually have a check and balance on the government. And that's really what guns are about. And people don't understand that. And they're not only that, is they see 3 or 4 shootings on the news or something like that, and they think that happens every day. They don't put things in perspective, as I was talking about earlier. And we'll get to the whole perspective thing about the amount of people in the country and the percentage of things that happen and the amount of times or the amount of people that it actually affects in terms of the total population, because you have to factor that in. Because if the United States was a country of 1 million people, all of these things wouldn't be happening, or they'd be happening even less than they are. But government media wants you to be scared. They want to program you, make you think you need government and all of this shit. And guns is the biggest thing, because they know once they get guns from people, we're really fucked. I mean, we're pretty much fucked already. But there are some things that we can do, like non-compliance and things like that. But so the end game, I believe, for government is taking control over every aspect of your life. And you look at what they're doing now, they're setting up the infrastructure to do that. People look at spying like it's no big deal. Like, oh, who cares? I'm being spied on. All my devices, the information's being collected. My camera on my computer might turn on and record me. All of this shit, nobody seems to give a fuck about. The police are arming, with automatic weapons and, tanks and all of this shit. That, I wouldn't say nobody seems to give a fuck, but politicians don't seem to give a fuck. And if they do, they're just talking shit. They're not doing anything about it, because that's part of their plan. They're putting in this infrastructure. So at some point, they'll drop the illusion of, because right now it's an illusion of freedom. Some people actually believe that they have freedom, and it's still an illusion, and it's still I'm living comfortable. I'm not saying me, but people have the attitude, I'm living comfortably enough where they haven't done enough yet for me to care. And I think that's the attitude of most people. But what keeps happening is you have, whether you want to call it a shadow government or the powers that be, that they're moving in that direction. And every president keeps moving in that direction. And it just so happened that, where Obama came in, he came in when surveillance started to get more and more prevalent. And it's been going on for a long time, but they've been getting more and more technology. So if it would have been Romney, you would have had the same shit. So Bush just passed the baton to Obama, and Obama's going to pass the baton to Trump, and it's the same thing. And what Trump will do is the same shit. Is he will continue to, and in a lot of the things he even says or has said support this and his attitudes, but we'll continue with that same shit. More surveillance. He talks about terrorists, and we need more military. We need to respect the police. These are all things that he has said, and he's going to go along with the same shit. Now, other things that he's going to do that don't affect their whole, agenda. Sure. And there's things that, Obama has done, I'm sure, that have nothing to do with that agenda, because you got to keep the illusion of freedom. So that's the whole thing. They still want to maintain the illusion of freedom eventually, and they're starting more and more not to give a fuck. And that's why, a lot of people don't believe in false flags, although it's documented, ones that have happened, or ones that they were planning on happening, what was the one in Cuba? Operation, I can't think of the name right now, where they were going to conduct terrorist attacks and blame it on Cuba. And this is all documented. So it doesn't hurt them. It helps them. If you look at Sandy Hook, which I'm going to do a show on next week, and I'm starting to believe that I don't even know what happened there anymore. I thought that it was more of, okay, we're not getting the right story. There were other people involved. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if nobody died in Sandy Hook with all the information that I've seen. So I hope to do that show next week if I still don't feel like I have enough information, because I really want to be able to bring that to people and have enough information to make a logical decision in how I present it. And I don't want to come off like I'm just some lunatic saying, oh yeah, I believe this. No, it's all based off facts and information. So I have that planned for next week. I may do a 2-part show the day before Thanksgiving and on Thanksgiving Eve. And of course, the archives are there, so people can always listen to it after if they can't listen to it live. But I'm doing a show on that next week. So if you want to listen to it live, I have it scheduled for next Wednesday, and probably, like I said, Thanksgiving night as well. But it all depends on where I'm at that point. Because there's still some things I want to make sure I look enough at the other side. I don't want to take, which I started to look at that too, and I can't see anything on the other side that refutes the things that I've seen. But I don't want to get too much into that. So anyway, but that's something they do to push the agenda, like Obama did with Sandy Hook, where to get rid of guns. And that's how bad they want to get rid of guns. And somebody brought up this point that it might have been Ken Shorgen, who was on last night, that it might have not. But the reason that they want to go after what they call quote unquote assault weapons, which are responsible for a tiny amount of deaths compared to handguns. It's handguns that kill the majority of people, even though it's still it's not even 1% of the people that die in a year. It's like probably 0.5%, if that, if you don't count suicides. But because you can conceal it, they're easier to conceal, obviously. So many more people are killed with handguns than what they call assault weapons. However, assault weapons, which is not even a real thing, but rifles, military-style rifles, are going to do you a lot more better or a lot more good if you ever got into an altercation, not a war with the government, but where you had to defend yourself against the government or against government agents. And that's why they want to go after those, because it gives them more power as opposed to, having just handguns. And I remember fucking Pierce Morgan, who did every show for about 2 months on guns. But I can't do an English accent good. But, why do you need, a 30-round magazine? And a clip is actually like a bunch of bullets stringed together on a piece of plastic. They're not clips, they're magazines. Which sucks because there's so many hip-hop songs that I don't know any that they actually say magazine. They all say clip. So they don't even know what they're talking about. But it's a magazine. Anyway, now I totally forgot my point when I was thinking about the whole magazine thing. But it would obviously be a lot easier to, Piers Morgan. That's what that he said, why do you need, a 30-round magazine and an AR-15? And I would have told him straight up, because the government continues to take away people's rights. And at some point, I don't believe in revolution. I don't believe in fighting the government physically, because then you just get another government. But that doesn't mean that I don't believe in self-defense, and that at some point they'll take away so many freedoms that you'll get in an altercation where you have to defend yourself. So that's what I would tell him. That's the main reason. Because even George Washington said that we should have more weapons than the government. And you could say, yeah, it was a different time, whatever. But the whole point of that was, if the government took total control like they're doing now, you wouldn't even have to have a battle with them. It would be a bargaining chip that, hey, look, you can't, just like they don't go to war. We talked a little about this last night with other countries with nuclear weapons because they know it's suicide, essentially. So it would be the same thing, that things would get negotiated. The government wouldn't just do whatever the fuck they want to do. Like now, they do whatever they want to do because there's no consequences. The people can't do shit. It's an oligarchy, which means the elite rule and the people have no say. And if you doubt that, then show me how you have say. Go fucking get something done and show me that you've done it. Go call your congressman, change a fucking federal law. Get a federal law changed. Like one that actually means something. Or maybe even one that doesn't mean something. You have no fucking say. Especially on a federal level, but pretty much on a state level as well. But it would be easier to get something, on a state level. But it's not going to be anything that's related to freedom. It might be something, meaningless and stupid that you, somehow if you were friends with a assemblyman or something or a state senator and, gave them a bill and they were somehow able to get it passed. But it wouldn't be anything that had to do with, freedom or legalization of drugs or like any of those type of things. So my point being that you can't even talk to your congressman in Washington. You'll just talk to their fucking secretary. So point being, you don't have any say. So the only way to change things now, in my opinion, is outside the government. The government, to me, is just meaningless. It's an organization that extorts money from you. It steals money from you. Look up the definition of extortion. If you own a house, try not paying your property taxes. Try not filing tax returns. And at the same time, they do whatever they want to do. They pass whatever laws they want to pass, whether it violates the Constitution or not. They violate their own laws, and they're above the law. So essentially, they're going to keep moving towards that ultimate, they control everything. And that's all governments, in my opinion. And obviously, to say that, well, if we get the right people in and we follow the Constitution, well, that obviously failed. So a piece of paper, even if you write, a new constitution that says essentially the government, all they can do is, arrest people for murder, rape, and robbery, or, those type of things. It won't matter because that won't last. It's just a piece of paper. Government runs by force. They have no authority. The only reason why they're able to control everything is they have a bunch of men with guns. That's it. That's why the people have no say, because the people don't have, enough balls, but don't have enough people with you look at how armed the police are, and I'm not saying go attack the police because I don't believe in that neither. As I was saying, I don't believe in going and attacking anybody or, I believe in non-compliance and then getting people to see the truth and then slowly dissolving the government that way. But just the fact that if people had the same weapons, that would just be a bargaining chip. And I don't even think that would last, because the government would figure out some way to get more weapons so they could have the upper hand. And that's why government doesn't work. I believe in an organized society. But if you want to be free, if you want true freedom, you can't have rulers. So I'm going to take a quick break. Then I want to get into the numbers regarding we started to get into that, but the people that voted and percentages and things like that, and then go from there, getting into Trump and the protests or riots and all of these things going on, and how on the other side you have people that sound like they want to blow fucking Trump, people that have spoke out about government and all the bad things they've done, and now all of a sudden Trump is the savior. It's insane. So we'll talk about all those things and more when we get back. And of course, anybody who disagrees with me, or if you agree with me, or whatever, you just want to ask a question or make a comment, you can always call in at 702-470-7664 or Skype in username Nonpartisan Liberty for All. And if you forget those numbers, the easiest way to remember is nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. Just go to the contact page and it has all that information there. If you want to send an email, or you want to get the number or the Skype username, or you can also go to the chat room. There is a chat room on Spreaker, and you can always go in there and type a question, and I might not notice it right away, but I will see it and I can talk about it on the air. So any of those those forms of communication, if you'd want to use any of those, you can. So we'll be right back after this. Nonpartisan Liberty for All, nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. And we are talking about the election, the meaningless election, regardless of what people think. So we'll be right back after this.
We did it. I'm so exhausted. I can't even really express how it is that I feel. And I mean we. We have beat the most organized, well-funded criminal enterprise in the history of the world. The war is certainly not over, but this was one of the biggest battles, one of the most difficult. I know that many of you are exhausted. I am absolutely exhausted from covering this from the last few months. We're going to have a nice little celebration here over the next few days, but don't think that the war is over. This country's in big trouble. It's in big trouble financially. It's in big trouble morally. It's in big trouble intellectually. So we have a lot of work to do if there's any hope of restoring America to its once great glory. Donald Trump will now become the captain of a sinking ship, and it's up to him and it's up to all of us to come together to try to plug the holes and keep this thing floating and finally repair it. The mainstream media in this country has completely lost all credibility, particularly with the millennials now. There's an entire generation who will never trust anything that CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, all these major media outlets, the Washington Post, etc., BuzzFeed, ever say again. I want to thank all of you, the viewers, for riding alongside of me in this incredible journey. This channel has become a tremendous success over the last few months, 17 million views in October alone. This just shows conservatism is cool, conservatism is counterculture, conservatism is correct. And to be clear, it isn't smooth sailing from here. This country is on its last leg. Things are very fragile right now, but this is a tremendous victory against liberalism, against the Bilderberg Group, against these criminal, corrupt, special interest groups that are pushing for this new world order. Hillary Clinton is just a figurehead, just a mouthpiece, just a puppet And if you start to go down the rabbit hole, you can begin to see the mechanisms of power that it is that we're fighting. Nobody knows what's going to happen next, and nobody knows how vicious the counterattack by the liberals is going to be. But I know this: we are ready. We are the resistance, and we are rising.
This point in Austin, Texas, on beautiful Mount Bonnell, to relay to you the fact that we have major choices to make as Americans of every race, color, and creed to decide whether we want to go back to what made this country great: low taxes, low regulations, private property, support of the family, support of sovereignty, or whether we want the siren song of globalism that's nothing but modern corporate slavery worldwide. And on my way here, Donald Trump gave me a call. And I told him, Mr. President-elect, you're too busy. We don't need to talk. But we still spent over 5 minutes. He said, listen, Alex, I just talked to the kings and queens of the world leaders, you name it. But he said, it doesn't matter. I wanted to talk to you to thank your audience, and I'll be on the next few weeks to thank them. I said, is this a private call? He said, no. I want to thank your viewers, thank your listeners for standing up for this republic. We know what you did early on and throughout this campaign, stand up for what's right. It shows he's not the average elitist. These stuck-up nobodies who believe they control the world, who believe everybody's an idiot, who tell you over and over again that, oh, you can't win the primary. Even if you do, we'll take it away from you. We're the new royalty. Or the people that tell you have absolutely no rights or freedoms. This is what they do. They've been wrong on every front. The pollsters were wrong because they were lying.
University of Texas Tower, where a large protest is going on, the F Trump protest. We're not even 24 hours into his president-elect candidacy, and this is their reaction. They attack Trump as a racist, a misogynist, a rapist. But do they actually know the facts? What's your opinion of Trump being elected president?
I'm really sad and disappointed.
Why is that?
Because I think he's a terrible person who doesn't deserve to be the face of the United States.
Why is he a terrible person?
Well, he's been accused of sexually assaulting several women. He's also racist and quite clearly sexist, possibly homophobic.
Okay, all right. Hillary was also under NYPD investigation, according to Eric Prince of Blackwater, and she was found to have visited Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island 6 times. So she is under investigation.
I don't think several women have specifically come out and said, this person sexually assaulted me.
About Hillary Clinton?
Right.
Yeah, they haven't. It's under investigation.
Right.
As is Donald Trump. What about the racism?
What about the racism?
Yeah,
I mean, everything.
how do you explain the racism?
He was endorsed by the KKK.
Okay, he's endorsed by the KKK.
Any person who's the KKK
All right.
is like, this is my guy.
Do you realize Hillary Clinton's mentor was Robert Byrd? Is that just a joke? Is that just a joke to you?
Is what a joke?
Today, our country has lost a true American original, my friend and mentor, Robert C. Byrd. Senator Byrd was a man of surpassing eloquence and nobility.
There are a lot of people who wrote these eulogies for Senator Byrd in the newspapers, and I read a bunch of them, and they mentioned that he once had a fleeting association with the Ku Klux Klan. And what does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. He was a country boy from the hills and hollows of West Virginia. He was trying to get elected. And maybe he did something he shouldn't have done, and he spent the rest of his life making it up.
I don't understand why you asked if that's a joke.
Well, if Trump is a racist, why isn't Hillary Clinton a racist?
Is KKK endorsing Hillary?
The Klan was her mentor. Why is it so funny? All right, so why did you come up here to the protest?
I was walking to class and I saw it was when it was smaller here, and then when I came back... Fight! Texas! Fight! See, that brings everyone together. Fight! Obviously, it's a very, very big pro-Hillary, anti-Trump rally.
Earlier you mentioned the people with masks. Do you know who those people are?
From what I can tell, they're wearing keffiyehs, which generally come from the Middle East. There are a lot of Palestinian supporters wear them because that's like one of their...
It's actually, what if I told you it's the local Communist Party?
Oh, I knew it. It was. Because I mean, the pro-Palestinian group here on campus is very, very communist. I know a few people from classes that are involved with it. I think we can come together now. Donald Trump has said, "Make America Great Again." I think we can do that, and this is going to involve everyone across the entire political spectrum: left, right, communist, conservative, everyone is going to have to work together to make this country great again.
In fact, the majority of them actually believe they're going to be immediately deported.
Trump, he's got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho.
Why does Trump have to go?
Because he does not represent this country. His racist, xenophobic, and completely utter...
Where are you from, my friend?
I am from Houston.
Okay,
I was born and raised here.
Great.
I am a Muslim American.
You're an American. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I am a Muslim American.
Right.
I do not deserve to be thrown out of this country.
What about... Well, of course you don't.
Exactly.
Of course you don't. Freedom of religion.
Yes, sir. I do not believe Trump respects that. He believes all of my kind are terrorists, are radical Islamists, when very few of us are.
What's the first thing that comes to mind?
He's going to deport illegal immigrants who will help this country, and white supremacy.
The local Communist Party that I spoke to here in Austin wouldn't speak back because they don't believe in free speech, and frankly, they're cowards. This entire march was a march of cowardice. As Obama, your leader, has explained to you, you must accept this peaceful transfer of power and accept the resurrection of the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, of which this country was founded on. John Bound for Infowars.com.
Donald Trump reacting to the horrific attacks in Orlando by doubling down on his proposed temporary ban on Muslims entering the U.S. Trump said in a statement this: "We will have no way to screen them, pay for them, or prevent the second generation from radicalizing."
Is the presumptive nominee going too far, and should Muslim Americans be concerned? Well, our next guest, he doesn't think so. Tom Harb is a Muslim American himself, as well as a terrorism expert and co-chair of the American Middle East Coalition for Trump. Good morning, sir. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Good morning. How are you? Just for the record, I'm from the Middle East, American from the Middle East background.
So, Donald Trump doubling down on his Muslim ban. You have a number of Americans saying this is going too far. This might actually only complicate matters going forward. You stand by him. You say this is what needs to happen. Why?
Because we, as an American, we need our safety first. And our safety, our government must do whatever necessary to protect us. Anybody who's coming from overseas, especially from the Middle East today, and terrorists might slip through, we need to vet them out. We need to know who they are, because even the Middle Eastern countries between Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, Lebanon, Jordan, they are vetting people coming into their country from Syria or Iraq. Why can't we vet them coming over here to the United States? And that's why we support nominee Mr. Trump, because he's going to take a severe action to protect us. And as a person from Orlando, we don't want to see another situation like what happened, the massacres happened here yesterday, to happen elsewhere in our states.
So you agree with his idea to build a wall?
Of course. Again, you have a lot of refugees, you have a lot of immigrants come illegally to the border on Mexico, and no patrol could catch them all. Therefore, we need to build a wall, and we need to let the people come legally into the wall, like the big door he's going to build and so on, so we could protect our citizens over here.
Obviously, we're in the middle of a race for the White House. Very different perspectives on how you respond to an act of terrorism as we saw yesterday. How do you think it would be different under a Trump administration? You stand by him, you support Donald Trump. What would he do differently than what we're seeing play out with the Obama administration? How should we be thinking about that if he were president?
Yeah, well, what I believe that Mr. President Obama, for the last 7-8 years, and especially for the last 4 or 5 years, he did not go after ISIS the way he should have. Him and Mrs. Clinton, they want to contain ISIS. And the containment of ISIS is going to keep spreading and committing atrocities and crimes and terrorism throughout the world, like what we saw in Europe and what we have been seeing here in the United States. So, and also furthermore, President Obama back in 2013, he took out any references toward Islamic terrorism from the FBI training books. And therefore, that's what happened when the FBI were after this terrorist guy who committed the atrocities here in Orlando. The FBI closed the case because they couldn't use Islamic terrorism any longer by the FBI manuals. They closed the books in 2013, 2014 after the ban by President Obama.
Yeah, he also
we hope now.
He also had apparently been connected to the first American who was a suicide bomber in Syria. I do want to ask you, though, about people who are calling this a hate crime. We've heard that from President Obama. We've heard that from other politicians, a lot of people, and also from this group known as CARE. Explain to us what that group is and what they've said.
I believe CARE, they want to divert the real attention from Islamic terrorism to hate crime. They want to confuse the public and our intelligence services such as the FBI, the law enforcement. And that's the problem by itself. CARE is promoting to be the hate crime, so our intelligence services, they do not dig deeper into terrorism activities committed by Islamic terrorists from the Middle East and elsewhere throughout the world.
Tom Harb, thanks for being with us this morning and for your insight. We appreciate it.
Everything's set for tonight, Mr. Trump.
I wonder what Trump's game is this time.
Trump's got a new game. Trump's got a new deal.
What's your game, Donald?
Heard about Trump's new deal? What?
Trump has a new game. What is it?
Mr. Trump, Mr. Trump, is it an airline? A new convention airline, Mr. Trump. Is it a convention airline? Mr. Trump, please.
My new game is Trump, the game.
Trump, the game where you deal for everything you ever wanted to own. Because it's not whether you win or lose, it's whether you win.
Yes!
Play Trump, the game from Milton Bradley.
I think you'll like it.
Donald Trump has surprised many by not only entering the race for the Republican Party's 2016 nomination for president, but quickly building a substantial lead in the polls. So who exactly is Donald Trump? Donald John Trump was born in 1946 in Queens, New York. He's been wealthy his entire life. His father, Fred Trump, built a very successful real estate development business in the New York area, allowing he and his wife, the Scottish immigrant Mary McLeod, to settle their family in the upscale Jamaica Estates neighborhood. There, Donald attended the private Kew Forest School before his parents sent him to the New York Military Academy when he was 13 years old. Donald did well and eventually earned his bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Pennsylvania. When he was 25, Donald moved to Manhattan and took a bigger role in the family business. But within 2 years, he and the company were in hot water, as Trump management was accused by the Justice Department of violating the Fair Housing Act by refusing to rent or negotiate rentals because of race and color. Though Trump eventually settled the charges out of court, the company was still blasted as anti-black on the front page of the New York Times. Donald became president of the company in 1974, and after an investment from his father, took on bigger projects in Manhattan, with some notable successes, including selling the property to the city of New York that became the Javits Convention Center. Around this time, he began his 15-year marriage to the Czech-born athlete and model Ivana Zhajnikova. They became fixtures on the New York social circuit, and their 1992 divorce played out in the tabloids. In 1993, Donald married the actress Marla Maples, the woman he had been cheating on his first wife Ivana with for 6 years. Meanwhile, bad business decisions, like the acquisition of the Taj Mahal Atlantic City Hotel and Casino, had him deep in the red by the end of the 80s, forcing him to declare several businesses bankrupt, costing his investors hundreds of millions of dollars. But the Donald doesn't stay down and out for long. With the help of about $75 million in inheritance after his father's death, his fortunes were buoyed once again. By the early 2000s, Trump's name began appearing on developments and towers all over the country and world, including across the street from the United Nations headquarters and towers in Chicago, Honolulu, and Toronto, though projects in Fort Lauderdale, New Orleans, and Dubai failed to reach completion. In 2005, Donald married his third and current wife, the Slovenian model Melania Naus. But what really put Trump on the map of American consciousness is his role as the executive producer and host of the popular NBC reality TV show The Apprentice and its spin-off Celebrity Apprentice, in which contestants engage in competitive business endeavors before final meetings in a boardroom set across the table from the Donald and some of his most trusted associates like daughter Ivanka. Trump has made out like a bandit from his involvement in the show, earning more than $200 million over its 11-year run. This year, Donald declared his candidacy for the Republican presidential nomination in a long-winded, completely off-the-cuff speech that was widely mocked by the American media.
Okay, so probably like most people that are going to see, well, maybe not, because given the result, maybe I really am different.
Two butchers on a farm, come on, let's milk a cow.
In 8 years, that in her lifetime she deserves to be the first female president. And that's what makes me so sad.
Campaign, followed him for months. I saw him like 9 times. I met him. And then the Democratic convention came and he lost. And that was a battle within itself. But from that moment, I knew that I had to support Hillary Clinton because I knew what was at. It hasn't really hit yet that Trump is going to be the president for the next 4 years. And I'm so fucking scared. Even if you don't like her, she's qualified. And we end up with Donald Trump? Are you...
I was very hopeful. Cautiously optimistic, but I mean, we wouldn't have come here if we didn't think she was gonna win. I know. Like, I don't know what else to... He is a monster, and he is gonna be our friend.
And then you have this outcome, and you have people putting children to bed tonight. This was a rebellion against the elites. True, it was a complete reinvention of politics and polls, it's true. But it was also something else. We've talked about race. I mean, we've talked about everything but race tonight. We've talked about income. We've talked about class. We've talked about region. We haven't talked about race. This was a white lash. This was a white lash against a changing country. It was a white lash against a black president in part.
I have no respect for women who voted for Trump. Okay?
Yeah, me too.
I think so poorly of them, and the reason why is because, look, I don't think that you're a single issue voter. I just think you're dumb, okay? I think you're fucking dumb.
West Side.
The world is mine, nigga, get back. Don't fuck with my stack. The gauge is whacked. About to drop the bomb, I'm the motherfucking dime.
Nonpartisan liberty for all, and we are back. A lot of clips there, a lot to talk about for both sides, which I think both of them are fucking ridiculous. And that's where, as I said, I come to the conclusion that nothing's going to change. Things are going to go on. Our freedoms are going to continue to fade away. The government's going to continue to take more control. And the next president will do the same shit. You know, yeah, Trump's a fucking clown. He's arrogant. It's almost like a joke to me the way I see it. But I wouldn't vote for Clinton either. Well, I wouldn't vote for anybody, to be honest, as I have talked about earlier. But Clinton is just as bad. To me, there's no difference, because in what's going to happen, there's no difference. Regardless of what anybody says, you look at what Obama said. How transparent. That's one of the things that he had talked about. I want to have the most transparent administration ever, and we're going to be. It was the least transparent ever. And that's just an example. Politicians are politicians. Just because Trump has never run for anything before doesn't mean anything. And looking at the actual, I had said earlier that Obama in one of his speeches, he said 43% of eligible voters voted. I don't know if he was talking about registered voters. I believe he was, because when I did my math before, I came out to like 30%. And I took more out than, well, maybe that's why. But if you look at the total population, because basically anybody over, especially kids, but anybody over, because look what's going on with, government schools and policing them and whatever, teenagers that don't get a say, but anybody over like 5, it affects. I mean, newborn babies, they don't know what's going on, but 1-2-year-olds. But so if you take the total population and take the 60 million that voted for Trump, because about 60 million voted for, each of them. So if you actually take that, which I will in a minute, I think it came out to like 30% or 25, but let me just do it again. Let's see. I'm trying to do this quick. Oh, I didn't do it right. Okay. So it's like 18, it's 19%. So you could say that 19% of the people in the country voted for this person, even though of those 120 million people, not all of them can vote. Some of them were under 18. Some of them are felons. I think that's ridiculous because you've been convicted of a felony that you can't vote. I think it depends on the state. But any say of the people have spoken, this is who America picked, whatever, any of that bullshit is just what it is, bullshit. 18% of the people in the country actually voted for you. that ain't shit. And even if we go by Obama's stat, and I think he was talking about registered voters, but say he was talking about eligible voters, that would mean that that's the amount that voted, right? So that would mean 120 million is 43%. And because the votes were about the same, take half of that, right? Which would be, if I'm calculating this correctly, 21% of eligible voters voted for. Oh, no, they said 43 didn't vote. So I'm sorry. That's why it was so close to the other number. So it'd be half of 57%. So it would be about 26% of the people that voted, or the eligible, 26% of eligible voters voted for the person that won, also voted for the person that didn't win. So either way, even if Clinton won, same thing. Just like when Obama won, and this is where we get into a lot of hypocritical shit with these protests, because it's really ridiculous, in my opinion, especially when there's so many other things going on, and they have no real agenda except to promote their socialism. Because even on whatever news channel it was, it might have been CNN, they were interviewing a guy on the phone, and he said, I'm from socialist whatever. A lot of these groups are socialist fronts, like Black Lives Matter is a communist and socialist front. It's a fact. And if anybody wants that information, I mean, you could actually see it on the signs. You could see the websites. Now, you couldn't tell they were socialist websites unless you went to them. But what happened was you have these millionaires and billionaires that hijack these movements, and not everybody that was involved in it was involved in it for that purpose. And I support anybody who protests the fucking police. I don't think they should exist. But, and I mean, they murder like at least 1,400 people per year. They're fucking pieces of shit and they shouldn't exist. They're all criminals, because anybody who kidnaps somebody off the street for possessing something they're going to put in their body, that's kidnapping, because you have the right to possess whatever you want. That's a natural right, and put whatever you want in your body. I don't give a fuck that the government says it's illegal. You arrest somebody for that, you're kidnapping them. You're a fucking criminal. So all cops are criminals. Not to mention all the research I've done and experiences I had. So I was fine with that. My issue was a lot of Black Lives Matter took the focus off of the police and the problem with the police, and everybody just started talking about racism, and it's like police got into the background. And it's like, wait a minute, what about the police? We need to ultimately get rid of them, because we're better off without them, and have private. And just to make a point here, there's a difference between private and outsourcing. People talk about private prisons. They're not private prisons. They're outsourced prisons, because if it's paid for with tax money, it's outsourced. If it's paid for with your own money and you choose to pay them, that's private. So private security, based on the model of the Detroit Threat Management Center, is what should replace police, but I don't want to get into a big thing about that. But the reason why I think the protests were ridiculous, and I'm sure a lot of them were socialist and communist groups, they may or may not have been paid and funded. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of Trump at all. So, and I've made that clear. But they had no point. And that's why I think, they just to advertise their socialism. And their whole thing was they're hypocrites, because they're going around saying it's not my president. Now, I would say Trump is not my president neither, but neither is Clinton. If she would have got elected, neither is Obama. This is not my government. I have nothing to do with this government. I don't consent to this government. I don't believe in any authority of this government, but I'm consistent. It doesn't matter who gets elected. Now, if Clinton or Bernie Sanders, more importantly, would have got elected, they would have been fine. They would have told other people, hey, that was even if it was the same thing where he won in the Electoral College, they would have said, well, that's how it is. That's what they do with Obama. And that's what they did probably with the first Clinton. I don't remember, to be honest. I was younger. But it's ridiculous to have these protests that a lot of them are even leading to riots. The fucking guy hasn't even took office yet, and they're protesting what? Like, they don't even have a point to their protest. They just, well, he's racist and he's this and he's that. Now, I'm not saying I disagree that he said a lot of fucked up things that can be construed that way, and maybe he is, racist. I mean, towards Mexicans, I'd say based off what he said, it definitely comes off that way. Muslims, it sort of comes off that way. He hasn't said anything about black people. The issue that people have is they say, well, the Ku Klux Klan supported him and he didn't say enough to denounce them. And, you know, as much as I fucking dislike Trump, I don't know that I can fault him for people supporting him. And, you know, it's not like he welcomed their support and went and had rallies with them or something. So with that, you know, that's kind of pushing it, I think. But, I mean, I understand how people can come to that conclusion, definitely. But to protest? Now, if he did something once he gets elected and you want to protest an executive order or a law or something like that, or, I mean, people were saying he should be impeached. As I said, they said he's not my president, but they're hypocrites because it's him, you know, and these are people that want more government. They're socialists and communists, most of them. And they're out there saying that, oh, he's not my president. So if it's somebody you like, they're your president. If it's somebody you don't like, they're not your president, you know? So for me, yeah, I don't give a fuck who the president is. It's not my president. I was just born into this fucking country. I'd fucking leave if I had a place to go that wasn't already occupied by a fucking ruling class. I've thought about leaving. I don't know where the fuck to go. The whole world's been taken over. So, you know, some of these protests have even led to riots. It's just, hey, if that's what you want to do, that's your right to do it. But at the same time, it's my right to criticize it and say that you're ridiculous. Because really, nothing's going to change. And people are thinking like, well, if Hillary was in there, then things would go great. Things are still going to go towards a socialist fucking direction, actually. So to even start protesting before he gets in there, and we'll talk about how he's even starting to roll back on some of the shit that he was saying. But it's somewhat ridiculous. So, you know, I believe that at least some of the people were paid off. You also have not paid off, but were, you know, paid to protest. And that's with that's not just socialist fucking organizations. That's conservative and, whatever other words there are for conservatives, Republicans, whatever, as well, that they do this shit where anytime something gets that big, it's usually because there's political operatives involved on both sides. So again, if that's something you want to do, I guess I understand if you're getting paid, but for the people that actually wanted to be out there, it's pointless and stupid, in my opinion. I don't know how you have the time. I guess I understand students, maybe they're skipping class. A lot of them were at campuses like University of Texas, Austin, and I think UCLA. But getting to a point where you're rioting when he hasn't even taken office yet. And again, he's going to do the same shit that Hillary would have done, trust me, and move in that socialist direction. So most of those groups won't have much of a problem with him. And now this is just my opinion. Now, there might be other things that he'll do that don't fit into the agenda of the powers that be that people might not like. And those are things, hey, if you want to go out and protest. I think personally protesting, unless you get a lot of attention of the media, and you're only going to get it if they want you to, if it's because and I mean that in that the government wants you to, because the media is totally fucking controlled by the government. That's why I call it the government media. But it's just pointless in my opinion. I guess, again, if you're getting paid for it, then whatever. But somebody said that he should be impeached, and they're like, it's just, it's kind of funny. I mean, and then you have two of them, they took them down, and I played one. They had, people are crying and like, first of all, why are you even fucking videotape, that's like old, but recording yourself and posting it to YouTube because you're crying about Trump winning? And see, I don't care either way, because again, I realize that it doesn't matter. The people don't matter. It's the institution. And it's ridiculous. But and not only that is the hypocrisy, because hypocrisy is something that I can't stand, and they're total hypocrites. At least the ones that were in it because they believe in it. The ones that were getting paid, hey, make some extra money, I guess. And then people rioting. I mean, really? You also have people that were protesting here in Las Vegas that are too fucking stupid to know that the Trump Tower here in Las Vegas, most of Trump Tower, Trump doesn't even fucking own. I think they just licensed. I don't know if he owns any of it anymore. They license the name. He gets a fucking fee. So it's not even, I mean, I know the company that does own it, and they had bought it before Trump even announced he was going to run for president. So maybe they wouldn't have bought it had, I don't know what their opinion is on it, but maybe they wouldn't have bought it. But they needed rooms, so they bought the rooms there. It didn't make a big deal. At the time, it wasn't a big deal. But you're kind of affecting them, and they didn't do anything. But anyway, at the same time, you have Trump now coming out and kind of backpedaling. So, the other thing I wanted to mention that I mentioned briefly earlier is they're calling the protesters anarchists. Okay? They are not anarchists. They are fucking communists and socialists. They even said it themselves. An anarchist is not just total chaos. That's not what it means. It means no ruling class or no rulers. And typical anarchists, I'm not talking about the socialist anarchist or that still don't believe in government, but if you want to call them anarcho-capitalists or voluntarists or whatever, that don't believe in government. They don't believe in total chaos. They believe in the non-aggression principle, which is basically what I've been saying about, you should be able to do whatever you want as long as you don't hurt anybody else without a government ruling over you, without having rulers. Not violence, actually, they believe in quite the opposite. A lot of them are very peaceful. I would call them, there's a word for it, actually. I can't think of it right now. But what do they call them, people like Gandhi, like peace something? I know nonviolent, but I don't know, whatever. Like people that would fucking not even hit you back if you hit them type of people. I don't know, which is stupid. But anyway, a lot of anarchists are, especially the ones that are more leftist, but even the ones that aren't, some of them believe in that as well. The other thing that I had played was Alex Jones and this fucking Mark Dice, who annoys the shit out of me. He's like a religious freak. And Alex Jones is a guy who has said so much about government, how fucked up government is, and government did this and that, and they're going to take over, and they're going to kill people, they're going to reduce population, all this shit. But now all of a sudden fucking Trump is the savior. And I played one clip, but if you listen to Alex Jones say any of this stuff, and I used to listen to him, I don't actually listen to him anymore, but I went and looked or listened to the YouTube videos, because they're divided up into clips, about him talking about Trump and how, they're saying that he stopped World War III. And him and Stefan Molyneux, and those who don't know who Stefan Molyneux is, he's a self-proclaimed anarchist, which he's not. He's a conservative. He has, the last fucking 10 shows the guy has done, and he does he calls himself a philosopher. He's an amateur philosopher, but he does some entertaining stuff. Some of the stuff that he does is positive, and I do like, but some of the stuff I can't fucking stand, like that. And what he has done is over and over again how great Trump is, and Trump this and Trump that. And this is a guy who calls himself a fucking anarchist. And, they should all get together and fucking blow him. And it's not just these media pundits. You have other, first of all, you have other ones like this douchebag Wayne Allen Root, who calls himself War because of his initials. Yeah. Who I've actually met in person. The guy's he reminds me of Trump. He's an arrogant fucking douchebag. Anyway, he's most people probably don't know him. He somehow, well, it's easy. That's why he ran for president on the Libertarian ticket, because, of course, he couldn't get on the Republican ticket because he's a conservative who likes to. His intro to his new show is the conservative libertarian something. They don't go together. The real definition of the whole libertarian definition has been bastardized, because conservatives and libertarians are totally different. And conservatives and Republicans have turned off people to libertarianism and freedom that would normally, if they knew what it was really about, like the stuff I talk about and how I think. I'm not saying to the extent that I go, but at least how I define those things, and a lot of other people do. The people that believe in true freedom and liberty would probably believe in a lot of that stuff. Maybe not to the point that I go, but they get turned off because of these conservatives calling themselves fucking libertarians. So they think it's the same shit. It's and the socialists and the progressives help to do that because they want the same thing, just Republicans and Democrats. So they don't want any competition, so they do the same thing, and they call libertarians Republican-like, which real, true libertarians are not Republican-like. That's why I don't use any definitions. I don't call myself an anarchist or an anarcho-capitalist. I don't call myself a libertarian. I just tell you what I believe, and that's what the purpose of the show intro is. I mean, to introduce the show, but, mine's probably a little longer than most shows where I have, maybe a half a paragraph, or maybe a whole paragraph, I guess, when I introduce the show, because I want people to know what, a summary of what I believe in, instead of using one of these words that can just be interpreted totally wrong. So you have all these conservatives that are blowing Trump and saying how great he is. I know you have a lot of conservatives that were against him, like Glenn Beck and, Ted Cruz, I guess, who also ran for president. But you have a whole bunch of people at the same time that are like in love with Trump, whether it's because now there's different types of people. I don't get it. I don't. I've never liked Trump. He used to come on Howard Stern when I was a listener. I could never stand him because he's just an arrogant fuck who brags about himself all the time. And really, that shows that you're insecure. I mean, if you're always bragging about yourself and telling people how great you are. And I could never stand him. I didn't know why I had him on the show. He was just fucking annoying. And then I happened to listen to the town halls, all the debates, even the Republican debates, just because, as I've talked about, I'm able to listen to basically, I would say listen to the radio, but instead I, put on a debate and listen to it while I'm working. I have that type of job. So I wanted to know, for the purposes of my show, especially when I was going to do a show on Trump and how I can't stand him, which I did do, I wanted to see what his platform was and what he was going to say and all of this shit. He's never said anything that's pro-freedom, although you have these guys like Stefan Molyneux and Alex Jones saying that, he's for freedom. And that's what I mean. These guys, they don't know what freedom is. He wants a bigger military. He's talking about how the military, Obama decreased the military. And I don't know how much, by what percentage, but I'm sure barely by anything. And that's the biggest expense there is the military when you look at the budget. And I don't even believe that there should be a military, first of all. But there's like thousands of bases around the world. And this guy wants a bigger military. He totally supports the police. He mentioned that people don't have enough respect for police and this and that. Rudy Giuliani is part of his team, who might possibly be Secretary of State, who's a total authoritarian. All of these things. And that's really what Trump is. Trump is like a dictator type. He's an authoritarian, at least in how he was acting. Now, what he did, and you can tell in his speech after he won the election, is he totally kind of changed his tone and he was more open and nicer and all this shit. And then in his interview on 60 Minutes, he starts talking about, well, on the deportations, we're going to go after the criminals and then we'll figure it out. And on the wall, yeah, we're still going to build a wall, but we could have some fence too. One of the things he did talk about is being a businessman and negotiating. And that's what he is. He's a businessman that is going to sit and negotiate, and he's going to be the puppet of the powers that be the same way. And he's going to call it, well, I negotiated with them and I negotiated with, I make deals. I made a deal. And that's the other thing that he had said, along with all the policy stuff, which who knows how much of it was to attract voters, because we know on the religion shit was proof. What he did was, and I don't know how many people heard this, but he tried to get the evangelicals, and he started talking about being, I think, Christian and, the Bible and all this shit. And you could tell it was total bullshit. I mean, he did a really bad job of trying to come off as a religious person. And he was just trying to get their vote. So who knows what he really stands for. He used to be a Democrat. But like I said, that's why with all of these things is that I believe the powers that be thought the best option would be to go with Trump because, one, you have division, you have the people protesting, you have all that. That's good. Anything that helps government or something that prompts a government reaction, like the police have to respond and shit like that. And then you have the controversy part, but they know that they can negotiate with him and that he's going to do what they want him to do. Plus, you know, I do believe he is an authoritarian based on just his prior actions before he even ran for president. His wanting to sue people. He made a statement about freedom of speech. Like, who gives a fuck about that? You know, his wanting to go after people that say things about him in the news. He threatened to sue Bill Maher because he said that he was related to chimpanzees or monkeys or something because of his hair. I mean, all of these things show the type of person that he is. So he'll be able to get the job done that the powers that be want him to get done. And Glenn Greenwald wrote an article regarding Obama and not how many executive orders, but the type of executive orders. He wrote a lot of executive orders that were just straight up laws. And that's not what they're for. Really, I believe they're just totally unconstitutional, but they're supposed to be more administrative. From what I read about executive orders was an existing law, and they're kind of administrating the law that's already been passed or things like that, not just creating your own laws. And that's what they're trying to do. And of course, the Republicans aren't going to stop them. They're all on the same side. They all have the same goal, more control. You know, they just want to control you in different ways. It's like the fascists and the communists. And essentially, he's opened that up. And maybe Trump will open it up a little more. And then the next guy will have even more power till it gets to a dictator. I mean, who knows? As far as how these things are going to happen, how they're going to ultimately get their control, you know, whether it's going to be declared national emergency. And that's the first thing that came to mind with all the protests that Obama, well, what if he's going to stay in office and declare a national emergency? And I don't think that now. But maybe that will happen with Trump. Or maybe it will happen with the next president. They have all these laws, most of them executive orders, where they can pretty much, by law, not that it means anything because they're going to do whatever they want, but by law, there's so much that they can do to just take over, martial law, whatever, detain people indefinitely, all of these things. You don't have any freedom. You just have an illusion of freedom. And Trump becoming president is not going to change that for the good or for the worse. It's going to be the same thing whether him or Hillary was president. For the most part, is you're going to continue to lose more of your freedoms. And they're going to continue down that generational line that I talked about, where, you know, it's like climbing the fucking stairs. They're going to keep going and going, and they're getting close to the end of the line. They're definitely more than 50% there. Now, will they get there in my lifetime? I think it's more around the corner, because I think it's getting closer and closer. And I think Obama's presidency, they between Bush and Obama, they made a huge leap. And it wasn't because of Bush or Obama. It has nothing to do with them. It's just it could have been fucking Gore and McCain, or Gore and Romney, or Kerry and fucking whoever, fucking Kerry and Obama, whatever. Or Kerry and McCain, whatever combination, it doesn't matter, and that's the point. So where does that leave us? Now, I was thinking about this today, of writing a I can never say the word, Declaration of Independence Part 2, and writing basically what they did is saying, we don't recognize your authority. We refuse to obey your laws. We're not your fucking slaves where you can extort us. Think about that for a minute. They take, at least my money, they take about 25% of my money without my consent. It's extortion, because if I don't file tax returns, I will go to jail, or they will try to take me to jail. So, not that this would even do anything, but I know now they have the online petitions. I was thinking of writing something like that and seeing how many signatures I could get. Now, that won't really do much, but it will put the ideas out there. Because as I've talked about, and people go to this page, I even created a page for it, and I got like 13 likes. And I mean, I have so many more on my other pages. It's like I get views all the time, but people are scared to like it. It's very strange. It's not strange, because I think people are scared. And if people don't like it because they're scared, that even shows more how they're scared that the government's watching them and paying attention to what they do, and they don't want to be part of a page like that. And it's understandable. I understand that. But when it comes down to it, there is no changing things via the system. It's not going to happen. It's too late for that. I think it was too late after they installed the Constitution, or at least, maybe a couple years after. But I wasn't around back then, and I don't know enough about it to say. But there's no doubt it's been too late for about 100 years. In 1914, and I always mention this, was the first law they passed where the government, and I think that this is like a milestone, really, in a negative way, where the government told people what they could and could not put in their body. Before that, all drugs were legal. Not only were they legal, but the government didn't get involved in them. And that's the thing with cannabis that bothers the shit out of me. And like I said, here in Nevada, it's legal as of January. They don't have like a system for it yet. I guess they're going to give out, you got to get all these permits and all this shit to buy a store. But I mean, if you have it on you, and they want to limit how much, like you can't have more than an ounce or something, but they can't prove where you got it. But the government shouldn't be involved at all. It should be like any other fucking store. I think you should be able to buy fucking painkillers on the shelf, or heroin, or fucking cocaine of a drugstore, because you used to be able to. But that's the first year that they passed that law. Now, right before that, a couple things happened. I don't know if this is coincidence or not. One is the income taxes, which the reason for income taxes, even though really that's a whole fraudulent thing where it wasn't meant to be income taxes on your actual income. And Larkin Rose did a video on this where he goes through all of the actual laws. It's actually a great video that I was listening to earlier. I'll have to post the video or the name because I forget the name of the video. But he went to jail for not filing his taxes based on these laws. But they passed the amendment to the Constitution regarding income tax, but also the Federal Reserve, all right around that same time. So I don't know that law, which was actually a law against opiates and heroin, had anything to do with it. But, you know, it's something to think about all around the same time. And the reason for the income taxes to eventually trick people into thinking they had to pay income taxes and then putting them in jail for it, when really it was meant for, I believe it was for foreign, like if you sell something to a foreign country or something, it wasn't supposed to be on your actual like job, wasn't supposed to be taxed. And you see what happened with that is, and one of the reasons was after they passed, created the Federal Reserve, it was so these fuckers who created the Federal Reserve and owned it and the elite could actually get some of these income taxes, whether it was through the government funneling it to them through buying stuff from their businesses or whatever. They'd have more money to do things with. And that was, I think it was over from the beginning, but that was the beginning of the end. Once you give the government that much money and you look what they you look what they have done with it and how much power that money gives them over the people, where they're able to give the police all this shit. They're able to spend money on whatever. And at the same time, they were able to print it too. So, but back then they were still on the gold standard. So for me, there's only one answer, and that's non-compliance. And that's it. And I said this last night, somehow we got into this conversation. And as I said, I don't believe in a revolution or violence or overthrowing the government or anything like that, because you just have another government that would replace it. Not only that, I do value human life, and I don't want to, hurt or kill anybody unless I absolutely have to. On the other side of that, I do believe you have the right to defend yourself against government agents. People have this thing in their head, and this is what Larkin Rose is great at explaining. You should check out some of his videos, because he's somebody who I didn't get my ideas from him, but I agree with pretty much everything I've listened to of his, but he just says it so much better than I do. And he's able to explain it so much better and really just tell people the truth in a way that they can understand it. And, he says kind of the same thing. He doesn't believe in an armed revolution or anything like that neither. It's just getting the truth to people. But within that there may be altercations where you have to defend yourself. But the main thing is the way people think of government, because they think of it as this entity that has the right to do what they do. Like, if a cop comes to your house and wants to come in or whatever, you're going to act totally different than if a regular person tries to do the same thing. So there are certain things that cops will do, whether it's legal or not, and you won't do anything about it. But if it was your average person, you tell them to fuck off, or depending on what they tried to do, you may get in a fight with them or shoot them if they try to assault you or your life is in danger or something like that. So the point being is that people automatically look at government differently within their heads. It's like programmed into their heads. It's hard for me to even fathom that at this point because I don't look at them like that at all. The only reason why I comply with anything that has to do with government is because they have a bunch of men with guns. Because they have no authority. I wanted to do some research because of this guy that Trump hired that they're saying is a white nationalist or part of the alt-right or something like that. And I didn't really get into a lot of stuff on him, but I was just looking at white nationalist stuff and alt-right. And there was this one person who was talking about, who was on Stefan Molyneux's show, for those who know him, okay, and is on all the time, who was talking about like how basically America is Christian white people's country and all this shit. And I'm thinking like, really? Well, the West Coast, I'm sure there's Native Americans and Mexicans, as a lot of it was part of Mexico, who stayed there after the U.S. took it and are just native to that, land. And this fucker is talking about, Christian white people it's just ridiculous. These fucking people, and Molyneux's on the borderline of that. If he's having this guy on and talking about, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong talking about it, but the way he's reacting to it is like, yeah, like I wouldn't say he agrees with all of it, but he's not disagreeing. And then you have former anarcho-capitalist Chris Cantwell, who's now a white nationalist or whatever, and people, in saying that, white people, I read this as a comment too on something I watched on YouTube, that white people should make more white people and each white person should have 5 children, like bullshit like that. And it's just like, what the fuck, man? When it comes down to it, and this is all ways to divide people. And that's what the government wants as well. They want to divide people. Really, when it comes down to it, I give a fuck about one thing. If people believe in freedom and they don't want to force me at the barrel of a gun like the government does, because if you support government and you're voting for all these things, or you're calling your congressperson and saying, I want this or I want that, all these laws are based at the barrel of a gun. So you're essentially using violence to get people to do what you want them to do. So people that do that, yeah, I have a problem with. But the people that believe in true freedom and liberty and don't want to tell me what to do, I don't give a fuck what race or religion or whatever. You don't find a lot of religious people that actually believe in true freedom. You find a lot of religious conservatives, basically because it's kind of the same thing. If you believe in true freedom and liberty and you reject authority, you probably rejected the authority of religion as well. Although what the government wants to do is get people away from religion so they worship the government. They want the government to take the place of the church and of God. But I don't think to be honest, there's not a lot of them, and I don't think, and the white nationalists, and they're really like a fucking joke to be honest. It's not funny because it's fucked up. But it's like, to me, they're just a fucking joke. So, but on the same side, I mean, when you got these people who are claiming to be anarchists like Molyneux and having this fucking guy on, this Dave Vox or something, I don't even know if that's his real fucking name. And I can't believe he actually fucking said that. Especially since they were all deists, the founding fathers, for one. So I don't know where you get that. And no, it's not I understand one thing that he said. And this is what I understand of some people. And the one thing I understand is kind of what I said, is that I understand this with immigration, although I don't agree with it because I don't think you need permission from government to go where you want to go. But people are scared of, because there's a government and people vote and all that shit, even though I don't think it really matters, but they want the support of the people, or at least the illusion of it, that if you have people coming into your country that don't believe in true freedom and liberty, that's where I understand. If you have the majority coming in that believe in socialism or whatever, and it totally changes the country in that sense. As far as changing the country in a racial makeup, I mean, who gives a fuck, really? And so I just wanted to kind of mention that, because I did look in, I was kind of trying to look into the guy Trump hired, and I don't know what to believe on him. I listened to a couple things. I didn't hear him say anything. I've heard people say things about him, but then you don't know, because the opinions I heard are biased, and I don't know. So who knows, to be honest with you, as far as, what his opinions are, and even if he's there, that it really matters. Because again, I think ultimately things are going to go in the direction they're going to go in, that the powers that be want them to go in. But I mean, as far as he goes, I don't know. That might be, more of an appeal to. It's like he hires one guy to appeal to these people and another guy to appeal to these people, just like he pulled the fucking, Christian shit. Like he pretended to be Christian. So I don't know. But yeah, it's there. The main thing I guess I learned, because of course I know that, racism does exist, and you have these people. I don't know that they're the quote unquote alt-right, I guess is a code word for white nationalists. I don't know that they hate anybody. I mean, I'm sure some of them do, but it's I don't know, they're like delusional. But they're definitely, I think the word racist gets thrown around. I really do. But I would call it being racist. Now, if you're Irish and you're from Ireland and you're proud to be Irish, or you're from Italy and you're proud to be Italian, I don't see any issue with that. But just like if you're, oh, well, I'm proud to be white and we got to maintain the white race. Like, why would you even give a fuck about that, to be honest? If you want to pass your genes down, fine. But even if you pass your genes down, you're and to a mixed fucking kid, what does it matter? I mean, it's just whatever. But what I saw was basically these people are fucking, they're clowns like Trump. And I honestly wouldn't worry about them. I think they're a tiny percentage of the population and they're just a fucking joke. So that's how I kind of see them. But as far as Steve Bannon or whatever the fuck his name is, the Breitbart, I guess he's going to be the former Breitbart editor or whatever he was over there. I think he ran it. I don't know enough about him to say as far as what his influence is going to be and what he really believes. But that's all the time we have for tonight. As always, I appreciate everybody tuning in. And today's Thursday. I was going to say we'll be back tomorrow, but we won't because today's Thursday. I remember I took Tuesday off. So we'll be back next Tuesday. Of course, don't forget to tune in on Monday to the Illumination Hour with Ellen Stallone, who does her show every Monday, 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. And it's a great show. Definitely makes you think a lot, very creative and very entertaining. And it's usually about an hour. So opposed to my show where I'm sitting there talking for at least 2 hours, if not more. A lot of times I go over. It used to be 3. She does about an hour. Sometimes she'll go over a little, but even if she did more, it would still be entertaining. She does a great job, and I'm really happy to have her on the network that I'm trying to build up. And, of course, if you'd like to donate, you could donate at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. I laugh because I don't think I've ever gotten any donations, but I am trying to build this up. And if anybody's actually interested, anybody that is out there working on shows or wants to work on a show or, always looking for shows or people to work with or, additional help. So all the contact information, nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. Thanks again, everybody.
Is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
But I understand you in the United States. I've just seen some headlines on Twitter or something. I don't really understand it, so maybe you can explain it to me. There's some sort of religious sacrament that's taking place in your country in a couple of days where people are going to go into some sort of booth and tick some sort of box, and some deity is going to decide how the country will be run for the next 4 years?
Yeah, it's this strange cult ritual, and the people involved seem to think it's not strange because they see everybody else involved, so they don't see it very objectively. Yeah, they basically go into this special building and go hide in a booth and do, I don't know what incantations or things they do, and then they press a button and decide which deity, which they don't look like deities, they look like people. In fact, they don't look like nice people, but I have it on good authority, if there is such a thing, that these are deities, and they get to choose one to rule the world for 4 years, and that counts as being free. That's good enough.
Right.
Close enough to being free is to choose between two psychotic sociopaths to violently dominate everyone. And everybody's all excited.
Now, come on, Larkin. They don't rule the world. They are the leaders of the free world. Get it straight. Yes, indeed. And this is an interesting sacrament, or whatever you want to call it. And be careful, everyone out there, if you take a selfie of your ballot after you've filled in the appropriate box, apparently you might be arrested depending on what state you're in. So, you got to be careful. The gods have put a lot of rules in place for this particular sacrament, and it's to be taken very seriously. All right, clearly you and I are on the same side of this conversation, but I am going to do my honest level best to put on the devil's advocate cap and actually attempt to put, I think, a real argument in place against our flippant dismissal of election and voting. Selection, as I like to say, because it's, but anyway. And I think there is a legitimate concern that people out there have when they hear people saying, don't vote. The concern is, if Candidate A embodies a set of policies we'll call Policy Package A, Candidate B embodies a set of policy that we'll call Policy Package B, if you truly believe, whether or not that belief is true and justified, but if you truly believe Policy Package A will result in better material conditions for you and your family, at least over the next 4 years, then isn't that an argument to do at least that in the meantime while you're working on other ways of trying to free yourself?
No, and here's why not. Let's say policy, collection of policies B is the one that somebody thinks is preferable, and A is just intolerable and unspeakable. In that mindset, all the tyrants have to do to get people to vote for A, the worse one, is to make an even worse one, so that between the two, they vote for the worse one. I mean, the less bad one in their view. But in principle, that means they can trick you into advocating complete totalitarianism as long as they can offer another choice that's even slightly worse. And if you look at American politics, that's what it's been for 200 years. It's almost always, that people complain about negative campaigning. Well, what else is there? All there is your guy is even worse than my guy. And the reason it's such a brilliant trick, well, it's not even brilliant. It's sad that people still fall for it. I used to use as a sort of extreme example, if they had Stalin running versus Hitler, would you still vote? Would you still think it's legitimate? Would you still go, well, we definitely got to keep that out of power? Well, that stopped being a hypothetical when the candidates ended up being Hillary, Stalin, and Trump, Hitler. It really...
there's all these things going on, and everybody's just talking about every aspect they possibly can of an election, and of an election of two people, first of all, that according to polls, nobody liked either of them. And the only reason that I brought that up, because I got criticized by somebody for bringing that up, about, well, Trump had, I think it was somebody that was defending Trump and how many people came to his rallies. First of all, I did a show about perspective, and we'll talk a little about that today, because it's all about elections are all about perspective as well, because you have a certain amount of people in the country or a certain amount of eligible voters, and then you have, how many votes the actual candidate that wins gets. So, like when Obama was president, and he even said this with Trump, this people have spoken and whatever, and which is a bunch of bullshit, because the majority of people do not vote for the winning candidate. Because, in this election, they actually didn't. But, the majority of people in the country don't vote for the winning candidate because most of them don't vote. Now, Obama actually gave a percentage of, he said 43% of eligible voters didn't vote. Now, I believe it's higher than that, actually, because it came out to about 120 million, and I don't know. Well, you would think he'd have the correct stats, so I guess, if he's making a speech and giving that number, that he's correct. However, there are people that can't vote because they've been convicted of a felony, and for other reasons. I mean, that's the main reason I can think of. But anyway, you have to put things like that in perspective, so we'll talk about that. But what I was saying about Trump was that somebody tried to say, well, 10,000 people went to his rally, so that poll doesn't, or not 10,000, but the tens of thousands of people that are going to his rallies. And I'm like, yeah, but there's 321 million people in the country, or something like that, 320 million, around that amount of people in the country. So that really doesn't mean shit. But the reason why I referred to that poll was to back up, and not just that alone, along with a bunch of other stuff, is my whole point that it doesn't matter what people want. They don't have a say in the government. One of the things that Trump was right about, yeah, it is rigged. Now, he said it as a personal thing, like it's rigged against him. But no, it's rigged in the sense of, and not even in the votes, although I believe that if the powers that be had to rig an election vote-wise, they would. But it's rigged in so many ways, and I don't know if people tuned in early enough. If you're listening live, if you're listening to the archive, then you would have heard it, to hear an excerpt from Larkin Rose's interview that he did, I think, about a week before the election, talking about, this lesser of two evil bullshit. And, if you were voting between Stalin and Hitler, I mean, would you actually vote for one of those candidates? I think to vote for somebody out of the lesser of two evil philosophy is ridiculous. And what another thing that I'm going to talk about, and that I believe as well, and that this poll helps support it at the same time, but I don't need a poll to fucking support it. It's just there's so many other things that you can point to. But, you look at what happened with Bush and Obama. You just look at the Obama presidency in itself. Things like that. But it shows that you don't have control over. It's just another example of you don't have control over the candidates you vote for. They're presented to you. Now, if you're not part of one of these fucking parties, then you really don't. You don't either way, but you have the Democrat and the Republican just presented in front of you, and vote for one of these people. Why? Why would I vote for one of those people? And first of all, I don't approve of people ruling over me, or of this government, or of any government for that matter. So I don't approve of a ruler. Now, what is somebody who runs for office? Really, what somebody that runs for any office is someone that's telling you that they know what's better for you than you do, at least in some aspect. Now, it depends on what office they're running for. Somebody could be running for school board, and they're saying when they're running for school board that they have some kind of plan, that they know what's better for the schools than you do. Now, that's an example of something that, in that example, maybe they actually do, but it doesn't matter. But when it comes to higher offices, obviously, where you're talking about the state legislature, or here in Las Vegas, we have the county commission. A lot of counties have county commissions, or your representatives in Congress, or president, which we'll be talking about tonight. So obviously these people are sitting there saying, I have the best. I mean, they don't come out and say it in those words, but they do come out and say it. They have a plan. They have an agenda. They have things they want to do. And these things that they want to do are going to affect your life. So what they're saying is that I know what's better, especially when it comes to an office like president or senator or, Congress. They're saying that they know what's better for you and your life and how to make your life better. And they can do a better job at it than you can. So you need them to rule over you, which is a bunch of bullshit. Not only that, and I'm not one of those people that down or fault people that vote. If you voted for president and or any of the things, I'm not somebody to say, well, you shouldn't have voted. However, if you voted for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, I think a little differently, because people could have voted for the third-party candidates if you really feel strongly about voting. And one of the things I had brought up was voting on the questions, which I think are rigged as well, to be honest. But they're rigged the same way. I mean, there was so much money. We had a question here in Nevada whether to do background checks on all guns now. And the money that came in from out of state, from Bloomberg, was...
He will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to take the law, we enforce it. But at the end of the day, each and every man should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer, the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan liberty for all. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is November 17th, 2016, and we are coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights, Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, on the Nonpartisan Liberty for All Media and Radio Network, which now runs 24/7, so you can tune into it anytime on the live stream, which you can catch on Spreaker.com and nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, and to the archives immediately following the show on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and iTunes. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote self-ownership and the ideas of true freedom and liberty, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom. Exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. And of course, it does a lot more. That's just a summary, a very small summary to kind of summarize my views and the views of the show. We, of course, are always happy to hear from you. You can reach us via phone at 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or via Skype, username Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Just send us a contact request and what you want to talk about, your name and where you're Skyping us from. That sounds painful, getting Skyped. And you can check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, which has the links to all our social media, Facebook, also original articles, as well as blogs, or I call them blogs / articles, and a bunch of other stuff. So please check us out there at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. So tonight we're finally going to talk about the election, not something that I really have talked much about in general, or I think I did one or two shows. One of them was because of the person that was co-hosting with me at that time for that show wanted to actually talk about the election, but we talked about it in a different way. And then I brought up Trump a long time ago just to talk about what a douchebag he is. And that was before he even got the nomination, which I haven't changed my opinion, of course, just because somebody got elected. But the reason, I mean, partially is not why he's a douchebag. We'll get into that. But because the reason why I pretty much avoided a lot of talk about the election is because that's all everybody else talked about. I think Bloomberg himself, his organization was 14 million right there. They ended up with 19 million versus 6 million on the other side. And it's still, even with all that money, I think it was 50.45 to 49 point, whatever the difference would be, 5.5. I mean, it was so fucking close that it barely passed, because this is Nevada. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, how the fuck does something like that pass in Nevada? And I'm sure a lot of people like me just didn't vote, where for that question, I could have went in and left everything blank and voted on that, and we had another question to legalize cannabis, and I should have voted on that, but that passed. So that was fine. But it is rigged in that sense, because you have in every state, whatever the election is, you have money coming in, unless maybe it's a little very local town election or something like that. Even with, I mentioned county commission. I mean, those are rigged as well. And what I mean is, money, political parties, all of that. You look at the presidential race. First of all, on one side, you basically had two people to choose from if you're a Democrat to vote for. And then on the other side, you had a bunch of people. But still, it doesn't mean you like any of those people. And these are the people that are able to run. It's not like anybody can just run for president and have any type of chance. Plus, you have to join the party, and you have to be supported by the party. And the party can pick whoever they want. And they actually have the right to do that. Like the Libertarian Party has a whole different nomination process. And that's the whole point of a party, that they don't have to have the people vote in their candidate to represent a party. The issue, though, is that money, federal money, which is taxpayer money, obviously, goes to these parties, and it shouldn't. And I have an issue with that, because depending on the state, I can't vote in not that I care, because I wouldn't anyway, but I can't vote in these primaries. So pretty much you get, as Larkin Rose was saying, you get, one person, and it's always the lesser of two evils. I think in this election was probably the closest to just pure evils that you're going to get. But either way, why are you going to vote for evil? If you're going to vote for anybody, vote for the third party. And what that does, if the Libertarian Party would have got 5% of the vote, they would have been able to been on the ballot in every state and participate in the debates. So you have a monopoly, really, a biopoly, I guess. But the Republicans and Democrats want to, they're on the same side. They want more government, and they only want their two parties to control everything and their two parties to exist. and they'll do whatever they can to keep it that way. So that's their ruling structure, and it will stay that way for the most part, I think, unless, even if, you know, a third party got into the debates, it's still, you know, with the money and the it's like a name brand. I mean, the majority of this country, I do not believe, is part of one of these parties. Now, they might be a registered Democrat and registered Republican because I feel like they have no option. And people convince you, oh, if you